Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here on Market Journal. I'm Bryce Duskett. As the month of January rolls on, many of our viewers today likely saw some unseasonably warm days this week. Wherever you're joining us, we do appreciate you making time for this show. Now, coming up on this week's broadcast, we'll take you back to our recent trip to Kansas City as we discuss some things to be on the lookout for in the new year. Plus, we'll have a couple of fresh crop talk segments. We'll get to those stories coming up here in a moment, but first. 2022 brought on some challenges for those in the agriculture industry. Cattle producers certainly saw their fair share of those challenges as the term black swan events has become all too common. The head of one livestock group in the state jokingly suggests that perhaps the black swan could be the new state bird. Those comments from Pete McClymond, who serves as the vice president and treasurer of the Nebraska Cattlemen's Association. We had the chance to visit with Pete just a few weeks back. Today we're catching up with Pete McClymond. He's the Executive Vice President and Treasurer of the Nebraska Cattlemen. Pete, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the year that it was, 2022. Plenty of challenges out there. I think when we look back on it, there's obviously several areas of challenges, but the one that rises to the top, in my memory, was the weather. I'm guessing the same is for your members as well.
Exactly. We had a little experience a decade ago, 2012, but this makes that look very nominal compared to what we went through. The fires, the lack of grass, the lack of feed, the management of cattle. So producers have had to scramble and they've come through it. But we need to pray for Mother Nature to do her thing here for the next few years to get caught up.
In addition to weather, there's some other challenges that cattle producers faced across the state of Nebraska that they didn't necessarily have a role in. They were just, there was the cause and the effect, right? Talk about some of those.
Yeah, a couple other things that were out of anybody's control that had a major impact. Early February, late February, we saw Russia invade Ukraine, and Ukraine is a very large producer of grains, especially wheat. So that had a huge ripple effect, not only on markets, but inputs, and so we're still dealing with that. And then, too, we're in a recession. I think everybody's getting comfortable saying that awful word, but as you look at all the things that are going on, it's having an impact. So producers are having to deal with things that are completely out of their control to stay viable and profitable.
The markets sure have been interesting for cattle producers over the past few years. There's been some push in Congress to get that fixed. Did you see any progress on that in 2022?
Yes, and we're grateful to our member and good friend, Senator Deb Fischer. So she did tremendous work. There's a lot of things that had to happen at her level to see progress, and I don't think it's over, but for this round, it didn't go anywhere. So she's listened to producers. She's taken our input. We're grateful to that, but at the end of the day, it's a hard issue, and there's a lot of people, especially in Congress, that know zero about this. So to get them educated is a hard thing, and Senator Fisher's doing that. We're there helping her.
That was 2022. Let's turn here where we're at in 2023. What are some of the key things you think that are going to be impacting cattle producers and the Nebraska cattlemen here in the new year?
Well, back to the weather. I mean, we saw in 2012, once it got done and we got moisture, producers do what they do best. They produce. So that means they handle their livestock, they manage forage, feed, and they make great decisions. And in 2 years, once we had moisture, we were in great shape. So let's hope and pray and have our fingers crossed that can happen. Obviously, we saw the commitment not only at the federal level, but the state level with ARPA funds to really try to address supply chain issues in shackle space. So thank you very much to the city of North Platte, the producers in that part of the state, the legislature, the appropriations committee to support sustainable beef. That is a huge win. And so, it's going to be at least 2 years until it's finished. and you saw a lot of it at the local level too. And so people want to know where their food comes from, and especially meat. And so we've seen a lot of people do the right thing, step up, and consumers enjoying that direct marketing from producers.
What's the best piece of advice you can offer your successor when they're named?
That's a good question. First of all, listen, because whatever person is selected, they're not going to know everything. So you have to go and engage and get input from everybody, be open. And as we've had here, is we joked, the fact is, since the bomb cyclone of March of 19, we've had numerous black swans, to the point I'm going to tell the governor we should change the state bird to a black swan, because you're going to need to have thick skin, because people need you to help, and people are passionate, and sometimes that passion comes out and is very pointed, and you better be able to handle it and make them still feel welcome and try to help. And so if you can do all those things, you'll do a great job, I believe.
We appreciate Pete joining us here on the program. The Nebraska Cattlemen, by the way, are gearing up for the 2023 Cattle Industry Convention. That event is coming up in the month of February. We'll be covering it, so stay tuned to Market Journal for more information. Moving along now, and happening in San Juan, Puerto Rico this week was the American Farm Bureau Federation Convention. It was at that convention that Farm Bureau and John Deere signed a memorandum of understanding that ensures that farmers and ranchers have the right to repair their own farm equipment. For more on this story, we turn to Alex Makovica. Alex?
Thanks, Bryce. That agreement formalizes farmers' access to diagnostic and repair codes, also manuals and product guides. It also ensures farmers will be able to purchase diagnostic tools directly from John Deere and receive assistance from the manufacturer when ordering parts and products. The right to repair is actually an issue that Nebraska Farm Bureau has been on the forefront of.
Nebraska Farm Bureau has been extraordinarily involved in this process of trying to get, again, legislation isn't always the answer to everything, and so we wanted to try to create a private memorandum of understanding. The Nebraska Farm Bureau members were the ones that introduced it in our policy process first. We pushed it to the American Farm Bureau level, and now we're seeing the fruits of all that work. The announcement, what it does is it really tries to provide a non-government solution to an issue where farmers did not feel they had all of the tools necessary to be able to fix their own equipment. And it's not just the fixing of it, it's not just the tools available, but it's also, once they make those repairs, being able to, given everything is so computerized, being able to reset that tractor so it'll start again once those repairs are made. I think this MOU goes a long way to that. There's some really good work that's been done. We are very excited about this. This is not the end of it. This is still a living, breathing document, but certainly, you know, from an initial standpoint, we are very excited to see where this MOU goes. And hopefully it's not just American Farm Bureau, it's John Deere, it's American Farm Bureau and all the other equipment manufacturers.
Nebraska Farm Bureau President Mark McCarg served on the advisory board to get this issue pushed through. He said John Deere was the first to hop on board, but he does hope other manufacturers will follow suit and follow suit quickly.
So originally we did talk to several other manufacturers, but John Deere did come the farthest, the quickest, so that's the reason we saw the MOU today. We have assurances from some of the other equipment manufacturers that they will engage in the conversation as well. So I'm really confident that we'll start seeing some other equipment manufacturers come on board, and that's really the purpose. But we did need to get something done up front with somebody. John Deere stepped up to the plate, and so they were the first ones, and we anticipate fully partnering with other equipment manufacturers.
John Deere's David Widmar said the company commits to engaging with farmers and dealers to resolve issues when they arise, and agrees to meet with American Farm Bureau Federation at least twice per year to evaluate their progress. Reporting in San Juan, Puerto Rico, I'm Alex Makovica.
All right, thank you very much for that story, Alex. We'll certainly continue to follow that right to repair issue and see where it goes. Turning our attention now over to the markets. This week we're taking a look back to our recent trip out to Kansas City and the NAFB Convention. There we caught up with Agricultural Economic Insights Managing Partner David Widmar to discuss what producers should be paying attention to in 2023. We're going to talk about considerations for 2023 with David Widmar of Agricultural Economic Insights, or AEI. David, we appreciate the time today.
Great to join you. Thanks for chatting.
Well, 2023 if it's anything like 2022, we'll have a lot of surprises that pop up. But as we look at the year ahead, what are some of the trends you're seeing?
I think the first one that you already mentioned is we need to expect a wide range of possible outcomes. There are just periods of history, and we're living in one of those, for better or for worse, where just the range of, again, as I said earlier, the range of possible outcomes is very wide. It's kind of human nature to think like, oh, this will never happen, and then we're surprised when it does. So encouraging producers to just stop and say, what's the range of commodity prices that I'm expecting? Well, let's spread that out just a little bit, because my bias is going to be to keep that tight. So to answer your question, first thing is stocks are tight. They're going to continue to be tight. Maybe they'll begin to recover in 2023, but we're going into this year with tight stocks. I think that's the most important story for U.S. producers. It's tight for grain in the U.S., also globally, but we also see tight conditions in meat inventories. And so when we have a supply shock, maybe it's a drought or maybe even the situation we had a year ago in Ukraine and Russia, that's what makes the markets really jittery. So the backdrop, tight stocks, and we'll see if we get some rebuilding here, or if it threatens to get tighter, commodity markets will get dynamic.
Usually tight stocks mean good prices for producers. We will see what happens on that front. The interesting thing, and a lot of people want to talk about the input prices right now and whether you should try to lock them all in now, or if for some reason they might go down. Do you see in your crystal ball the chance of those going down, or where we're at right now might be to stay?
So the first thing to keep in mind is fertilizer prices are down from where they were. Nitrogen especially is down from where it was this past spring. But if you bought fertilizer a year ago and you're pricing it today, you're going to see some sticker shock. It's still higher. So this relative question is always changing. We're encouraging producers to think about strategies that allow them to make some progress. So you don't sell your corn crop generally all in one day. So it also makes sense to not buy all your fertilizer on one day. So can you layer those purchases? Can you start to firm up the uncertainty around what your costs of production are going to be, but still keep your options open down the road?
What I want to ask you about, it seems like as we look over the past few years, there's always something that comes up in the cattle market. There was black swan events, we're labeling them. How does a producer protect themselves from those unknown things that we might encounter in 2023?
Well, I have the minority opinion that I'm not sure there's many black swans out there is what we need. Black swans are kind of a very specific thing, and we kind of typically use that with, I didn't think that was going to happen. Just because you don't anticipate something in your narrow range of possible outcomes doesn't necessarily mean it's a black swan. But the management lesson here, the management implication is really important. You need to build in contingencies for these unknown unknowns. Just because we have crop insurance and we signed up for ARC and PLC doesn't mean that our risk management plan is complete, it's robust. And again, we have high production costs, we have profitability, but we have uncertainty abound. And so that's a recipe for how do we make sure we have enough working capital? How do we make sure our balance sheets are in good place? How do we make sure that we have plans and goals that allow us to improve our operation down the road?
Tell me more about AEI and the services you guys provide.
So we focus on content, so articles. We have a podcast series that's topical, but we're trying to help decision makers in agriculture, both producers and those who sit across the desk from producers, make better decisions. And we think we can do that, we deliver that by providing data-driven insights. So if we're talking about interest rates or farmland values or commodity prices, we typically show decades worth of data to really provide a lot of context and history. We also provide a lot of frameworks and mental models to help navigate the uncertainty. So we don't have a crystal ball, but we're going to help you peer into your own crystal ball. We're going to make you your own guru and help you think about the uncertainty, because ultimately the decision maker has to make the decision, and we're just trying to give them a slight advantage so they can feel more confident and they can make that decision for the operation.
David, we appreciate the time.
Great chatting with you.
Coming up next week, we'll be back to our regular market analysis. We'll be joined by our friend Mike Briggs from Briggs Feed Yard. If you have a question you'd like me to ask Mike, feel free to email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll be sure to pass those questions along. Well, if you're an irrigator, you likely already know some of the most common challenges for center pivots, tower alignment faults, tire issues, and U-joints, just to name a few. But what if the center pivot could diagnose its own problems? Lindsay has been working on a prototype of what they're calling their smart pivot for expected commercial release next fall. These new pivots will be able to diagnose common issues and perhaps, in some cases, even prevent issues from arising. You can learn all about that smart pivot capability in the January issue of the Nebraska Farmer. Up next, a new installment of our Crop Talk segment. Digital tools on the farm continue to be a vital piece of the future, but maximizing the potential of ag tech hinges on a tool that most fields currently lack. That is high-speed internet connectivity. Well, in the agriculture field today, there are sensors, drones, new data available, all sorts of things, but they all rely on one thing, which is high-speed internet connectivity. That's a challenge you guys are trying to face in the ag space. To set this issue up, what's the challenge out there right now?
So like you said, we are observing a significant transformation in terms of leveraging some of the new technology that we see on the fields. We see a lot of sensors that monitor conditions on the field. We have begun to see unmanned aerial vehicles providing significantly different perspectives on the operations in the field. Autonomous vehicles and autonomous ground robots are coming up. So all this technology creates a lot of data and needs a lot of data. So we need to connect all these different technologies, sensors on the fields, UAV on the air, and our cloud infrastructure that can crunch that data. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing in the fields. Most of the agricultural fields are in rural areas. We have a significant digital gap between rural and urban areas in terms of connectivity. So one of the goals we have is to design novel, tailored solutions that will enable connectivity in agricultural fields.
You mentioned the difference between urban and rural areas, and specifically, it sounds like these companies that have internet solutions design those systems differently, are more catered obviously to the rural or to the urban areas where the population is. How does that look today about how they're designing their internet solutions?
So that's a great question. Historically, especially wireless communication solutions have been predominantly designed for urban areas. We are all using Wi-Fi connectivity. Wi-Fi has been specifically designed for indoor environments. And nowadays, we're trying to expand it to outdoor. We're all using our cell phones. We're connected through cellular networks. But majority of these technologies are fundamentally designed for urban environments. For example, we're observing the transition from 4G to 5G networks, which are characterized by densification and heterogeneity in the network architecture, which requires significant amount of infrastructure. You can deploy this infrastructure utilizing the vertical infrastructure in urban environments and cities. We're seeing more and more base stations being deployed on traffic lights, on street corners. Unfortunately, we don't have that same vertical infrastructure in rural environments. And that's one of the major challenges. When we try to take wireless communications that are designed and tested for urban environments and take them into rural environments, we see a lot of challenges. And that's one of the goals of this project that we're after, is to identify these challenges and then tailor solutions, design new communication solutions accordingly.
This has the potential, without a solution, to really hold ag producers back, because there's a lot of technology out there available, but without that high-speed internet connection, a lot of this stuff is not possible, right? Is that what you're seeing?
That's correct. We see a significant divide in terms of available technologies, like we mentioned, sensors, UAVs, robotics, and the percentage of utilization of these technologies on the fields. One of the significant barriers is lack of connectivity. If we cannot connect these devices, we can't really get the data and process it.
You and a group of researchers have received a $1 million National Science Foundation grant to work on this issue. Where's some of that research going to be tested at? The project is supported by National Science Foundation called FieldNets. We will be designing technologies specifically created for agricultural environments. And we are fortunate to be collaborating with scientists in University of Nebraska-Lincoln who work in Eastern Nebraska Research Education Extension Center, NRAC. We have had deployments in this area, in the fields in NRAC for a few years. And within this project, we will be deploying the first future
generation agricultural network, and then we will be utilizing this network for evaluations of the project.
What else is important to mention for our viewers today about this project you guys are working on?
So there's, like I mentioned, there's a significant gap in terms of connectivity between urban and rural environments. We are looking at agricultural connectivity solutions. We are looking at high-speed connectivity solutions using millimeter wave technology, which we just started adapting using 5G technologies, but they have not been tested in agricultural areas. Over the last couple summers, we have performed the first millimeter wave experiments in agricultural fields during the growth cycles of 2 different types of crops with soybean and corn. And we will be developing solutions tailored to these fields. In this project, we're also looking at architectural problems. One of the challenges you have in rural environments and fields in rural environments is the lack of backbone connectivity. So we're talking about cloud a lot, right? It's really hard to get to the cloud from a field to collect all the data and send all the data to the cloud, which means we may not be able to leverage some of the existing algorithms, solutions, such as machine learning solutions that have been used with the support of cloud. So what we're trying to do with this project is, instead of getting the data to the cloud, we're trying to bring the cloud close to the field through edge computing technologies. So the eventual goal is to be able to collect data on the field, to be able to process the data on the field, so we don't need significant backhaul connectivity. This has other implications than just utilizing the new technology, because with this approach, we can also keep the data on the field. There are significant privacy implications, especially farmers are concerned about ownership of their data. So these types of architectures will be able to keep the data on the field. We can process the data on the field. We can still utilize third-party algorithms in the field in a secure manner, and then support the operations in the fields.
It's a fascinating topic. We appreciate you shedding a light on it for our viewers today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, what the future could hold. We look forward to seeing the results of that research team. Last week, we discussed seed selection as a means of mitigation for certain soybean diseases this upcoming growing season. Another thing that soybean producers might be taking into consideration this time of year are seed treatments. We discussed this topic with UNL plant pathologist Dylan Mangel to get his insights on that topic. Today we're going to talk about seed treatment considerations. Of course, this time of year it's cold, kind of miserable out. We can look forward to the upcoming growing season. There's some important things to talk about here. There's lots of different products out there. I know you kind of break them down to 3 different classes though. What are those?
Yeah, so there's big decisions to make when it comes to variety selection and then pairing that with a seed treatment. So there's 3 classes generally available. There's fungicides, there's nematicides, and then insecticides. And oftentimes you'll have mixed products as well on a seed treatment.
So when it comes to paying for seed treatment, you want to know the field history to really know what you want to combat here in the upcoming growing season. Shed a light on that topic.
Yeah, well, with disease management, it's always going to be specific to a given disease. So knowing that field history, knowing what's in that field is going to help guide that decision when making that investment in a seed treatment.
We've talked about it before, but that's the importance of testing during the year. Producers have access to some resources there, right?
Yeah. If you know you've got a problem in your field or you suspect something that's worthwhile to make that investment and getting a proper diagnosis. And one place you can contact to get that diagnosis is the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. And for really reasonable rates, they can identify exactly what you're dealing with, so you can make the proper investment in a seed treatment or variety selection in the following year.
Mm-hmm. So back on seed treatment considerations in 2023, one of the important things to note is this is really for early season control only, right?
Yeah, seed treatments, unfortunately, they have their greatest effect earlier in the season. It's a small amount of chemical that's on that seed, and over time it dissipates, and that plant generally outgrows that small area where it starts off as well. So it's not enough chemical to control long term, but it does provide that control when the plant is most susceptible, when it's just trying to germinate and emerge from the ground.
Does it always pay?
It doesn't always pay. So unlike variety selection with traits, this is an added cost. So it's going to be an extra investment that you've got to make. And if you're planting in the perfect conditions, and you don't have disease pressure or insect pressure, it might not pay. So it's something to consider. Generally, the most beneficial conditions are going to be when you're planting into risk areas. Those would be cool soils, compacted areas, or in soybean on soybean production, for example, or just areas with a history of disease. Another time these might pay is when you're already starting off with reduced seeding rates. Soybean has a strong ability to compensate from losses in the early season. And if you've already got reduced seeding rates or lower populations, there's not going to be as many plants there to compensate if you lose part of that stand.
I think what I'm hearing, Dylan, is that it's not a blanket approach. One seed treatment does not blanket all of your acres, right? Talk about the difference there.
No, so chemicals are always going to be specific to the pathogen you're dealing with. So you need to know exactly what you're dealing with first of all, and then different chemicals are going to have different levels of effectiveness. So one tool that we have available for selecting seed treatments or comparing them is the Nebraska EC 130 Guide for Weed, Disease, and Insect Management in Nebraska. Now this publication, it's available for purchase through Nebraska Extension. It's got weed management information, plant disease information, and then insect information as well. We've also included prices in the 2023 version that's about to come out. So it's a great place to start when you want to make comparisons between potential treatments.
That is a great resource. Mm-hmm. Another great resource is some of the local folks on the ground selling those products.
Yep. Yeah, if you think you've got an issue, always talk to your local advisors, see what they've got to offer. If nothing else, just mention what you're dealing with and see what they have that can help.
Dylan, as always, good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Dylan for his time and expertise this week. As always, if you're looking for more information on seed treatments and all the latest when it comes to crops, you can look up the website cropwatch.unl.edu. Well, that is all the time we have for this week's show. Coming up next week, we'll be bringing you stories from the Pacific Northwest. We hope you'll join us on the program as we recap a trip that a group of wheat producers took. Until then, I'm Bryce Tuskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.